Hey guys, today we'll be taking a look at the two main forecasts that we have for the 2022 Senate elections, the 538 forecast as well as the Decision Desk HQ forecast. Both of these models are similar in that they simulate potential results based on inputted data that they put in, and so basically polling data as well as past voting patterns, the national environment, and things like expert ratings as well as fundraising. These are going to be the data points that help these forecasts make these projections, and so these are not predictions. These forecasts do not tell you who is going to win these races, but they do tell you the probability that each candidate has according to their models. And so right now, according to 538, Democrats have a 60% chance at retaining control of the Senate chamber, just 40 for Republicans, and this is a massive change from the forecast that we had just 2 months ago. If you look at this forecast at the very beginning of June, Democrats had a 40% chance at winning 60 for the Republicans. So basically, we saw a complete switch for the odds between both parties in just the last 2 months. And of course, this comes as Democrats are surging in the generic ballot. If you look at the numbers for today, Democrats are actually up by a margin of 0.2%. And if you actually look at the most recent generic ballot polls that have been done, Democrats have basically led in every single one of them. So if you really average out these latest numbers, Democrats lead by margins much larger than 0.2%. But because these polls are weighed and previous polls have a major effect on how the average is changed, we're probably not going to see Democrats lead by over 1% or 2% in at least a couple of weeks. And so right now, Decision Desk HQ also heavily favors the Democrats, giving them a 64.8% chance at controlling the Senate after November. And if you look at their map, we do see a pretty similar story, but there are slight differences. So in this video, we'll be going over how both of these forecasts project the most competitive races of the year, and I mean the top 10 closest elections that we're going to have on the ballot. And looking at these 10 races, these are really the races that are going to decide the balance of power after November. And I mean, just look at how competitive this map is. Without these states filled in, both parties currently have 45 seats, and so we're going to start off with Nevada and move from west to east. So in Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto is running for her re-election against Adam Laxalt, and according to the latest polls, Masto is doing quite well. She is up on average by 1.5% and has led in all of the most recent polls that have been conducted. The last time that Adam Laxalt led in a poll was 4 months ago, all the way back in April, where he led by 1%, and this was a GOP super PAC funded poll. Now, if you look at the 530 forecast for this race, you do see Democrats with a significant advantage. Catherine Cortez Masto is slightly favored to win with a 57% chance at victory, 43 for Adam Laxalt. And if you look at how this forecast has changed, Nevada has always been a state that 530 has favored the Democrats in for the most part. There was a very short amount of time in which Laxalt was expected to win, but Catherine Cortez Masto's lead has only expanded over the last couple of weeks. The popular vote margin is still expected to be just 1.4%, 1% less than the 2.4% margin that Masto had in 2018. So Nevada is going to be a very close election no matter what, and in my opinion, Nevada is the most competitive election that we have this year on the Senate level. I think that both parties are positioned pretty well to win this race, but as the incumbent right now, Catherine Cortez Masto is favored, and so on our 538 map here, we're going to plot down Nevada as a tilt Democratic state according to this forecast, and according to Decision Desk HQ, Masto has a 75% chance at winning, so significantly higher than the odds according to 538, just 24.6% chance that this race goes to Adam Laxalt. And if you look at the fundraising, Catherine Cortez Masto is doing significantly better. She has $9.8 million, so basically $10 million cash on hand, just $2 million for the Laxalt campaign. And so, of course, on our DDHQ map, we're going to plot Nevada as a lean state for the Democratic Party. Next up in Arizona, we have the competitive election between Mark Kelly and Blake Masters, although honestly this race has become less and less competitive as time has gone on. In 2020, Mark Kelly pretty easily won his election against Martha McSally, and this time around he will be running for a first full term with Blake Masters as the challenger, and Blake Masters has been absolutely tanking in the polls. Looking at the polling average here, Mark Kelly on average leads by 10.2%. The most recent polls conducted by SurveyMonkey actually put Mark Kelly up by solid margins in all three of their polls. And if you look at the 538 forecast, Democrats are clearly favored here, with Mark Kelly having a 71% chance at victory, just 4% away from Arizona turning into a likely state for the Democrats. So it is pretty surprising, and this is just mainly because of how good the numbers have been for Mark Kelly. And if you look at this forecast based on polls alone, Mark Kelly has a 91% chance at defeating Blake Masters. And if you look at how the odds have changed over time, I mean, a very similar story. Mark Kelly's odds has only gone up over the last couple of weeks, and they have gone up pretty significantly, pretty much exponentially. And so this race is becoming worrying for the Republican Party. If the national environment does not shift back in favor of them over the next couple of months, they could be in trouble in Arizona, which is one of the big targets that they have. And if you look at the popular vote margin, Mark Kelly is actually expected to win by a larger margin this time around than he did 2 years ago. And so on our 538 map, of course, Arizona is going to be a lean state with Mark Kelly winning his re-election. And according to Decision Desk HQ, we see a pretty similar story. Mark Kelly has a 78% chance at victory here. So according to this forecast, the state of Arizona is lean for Democrats as well. And I mean, a pretty similar trend here with Democrats' odds going up. And if you look at the fundraising for this race, I mean, an even more drastic difference. Mark Kelly has $25 million cash on hand, just $1.6 million for the Masters campaign. So the state of Arizona is going to be another one of those races that Republicans should be winning in, just like Nevada, but they simply are not, and that's mainly because of the candidates that they have chosen. And moving on to the race in Colorado, not one of the most competitive ones, but still in the top 10, Michael Bennet versus Joe O'Dea. Bennet is running for his third term. He was first appointed in 2009 and then won re-elections in both 2010 and 2016. And so 2016, the margin was not exactly the greatest for Michael Bennet, but again, Hillary Clinton did not do any better than Bennet here. And of course, in 2020, Joe Biden and John Hickenlooper both won their races by double digits. However, I do not believe that Michael Bennet is going to win by over 10%. 538 does believe that, though. They currently project a margin of just slightly over 10%, 10.4% to be exact. I do think that is going to be inaccurate. I do not believe that Michael Bennet is going to get anywhere near 10%. I still think that 5 to 7% is much more likely of a margin for the Democratic incumbent, but he does have a 90% chance at winning. I think that it's almost guaranteed that he wins his re-election. And if you look at the polls here, the only poll released between the two candidates shows Bennet up by 13. So according to 538 and Decision Desk HQ, Colorado is going to be a likely state. Looking at DDHQ, Colorado, same thing for Michael Bennet, 90.1. So both forecasts are almost identical in their ratings for the state of Colorado. And in Wisconsin, we now finally have the matchup between Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes. So basically, we have a matchup in every single competitive Senate race now, with the exception of New Hampshire. We still do not know who is going to challenge Democratic incumbent Maggie Hassan, but Ron Johnson is favored to win his re-election despite being pretty unpopular and also facing a primary challenge that he easily defeated. If you look at the only poll, though, Ron Johnson is actually down by 2% against Barnes, but as Barnes is now officially Democratic nominee, we're going to see a lot more new polls for this race, and that could change how the two forecasts rate the Wisconsin Senate election. If you look at 538, they currently categorize Wisconsin as a lean Republican state. Ron Johnson has a 68% chance of winning, 32 for Mandela Barnes. And if you look at how the odds have changed, I mean, very similar story in Wisconsin to the other states that we've looked at so far. The numbers have shifted drastically in favor of the Democratic Party. So Barnes is still very much in this race. We're just going to have to see how well he does in a head-to-head matchup against Ron Johnson. So on our 538 map, state of Wisconsin is of course going to be lean, and according to Decision Desk HQ, Wisconsin is actually going to be a solid Republican state. I think this is clearly wrong. I think the reason for this is that we only got one poll from this race, and Mandela Barnes only recently became the Democratic nominee, so we're just going to have to wait and see. This 4.4% chance for Democrats is clearly inaccurate. They even have Florida as a likely Republican state. There's no way that Wisconsin is going to be solid, so we're going to have to wait and see. But as of right now, Wisconsin is solid according to Decision Desk HQ. And next up, we of course have that race in Ohio, the race that Democrats are dreaming about winning, with Tim Ryan ahead by 3.9% in the polls. Many Democrats do believe that Tim Ryan could come out on top. I'm just going to say it right now that Tim Ryan is not going to win this race. I think that he can be very competitive, and I might change my mind on this in the future, but as of right now, it will be very difficult for J.D. Vance to lose. I think Vance is a terrible candidate, not just me thinking that. I mean, basically every single poll has shown Tim Ryan ahead, but we saw Sherrod Brown underperform underperformed significantly in 2018, and of course that was a very favorable year for Democrats. Jared Brown only won by 6% in the last Senate election, and he was polling in double digits against Jim Bernanke, so Tim Ryan's 4% lead is nothing in a state like Ohio, and of course Joe Biden underperformed by 7% in the 2020 presidential election. So right now in the matchup between J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan, 538 does favor the former. So looking at their forecast, Ohio is a likely Republican state. Vance has a 77% chance of winning, so it's very close actually to becoming a lean state. I think that could happen in the next couple of weeks here, but looking at this forecast, I mean, at the very beginning, Vance had a 90% chance of winning. Now Tim Ryan has almost a 1 in 4 chance, and if you look at the margin, I mean, it is expected to be closer than both the 2016 and 2020 presidential elections in the Buckeye State. So right now, according to the 538 forecast, Ohio is going to be a likely Republican state, but just barely, with Vance only having a 77% chance at winning. And according to Decision Desk HQ, Ohio is actually a lean Republican state. According to this forecast, Tim Ryan has a 32% chance of winning, 68 for Vance. And I mean, very similar story here. The odds have been absolutely dropping for J.D. Vance over the last couple of months. Not a good trend for the Republican Party, not what they want to be seeing. And if you look at the fundraising, I mean, Tim Ryan is destroying J.D. Vance in this department. However, J.D. Vance is a newer nominee with no political history, so that is something that's going to hinder him, as well as his fundraising numbers. But as of right now, J.D. Vance is doing terribly for a Republican nominee, but in terms of winning the race, he is doing quite adequately. So according to DDHQ, we're going to see a lean margin of victory, likely for 538, but still much more competitive than it should be. And now we have just 5 more races left. So starting off with Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, Democrats are up by 10.8% in the polls, with John Fetterman leading significantly against Mehmet Oz in every single poll that's been released so far. I mean, this race has become a disaster for the Republican Party, and unlike Arizona or Nevada, the Republican Party has an incumbent in Pennsylvania, that of course being Pat Toomey. Pat Toomey is not running for re-election, so Mehmet Oz is the Republican that was chosen to succeed him, and he has been tanking in his approval as well as just in the polls against John Fetterman in the state of Pennsylvania. And if you look at the 530 forecast, Pennsylvania is not even a toss-up race. They currently have it as being lean for John Fetterman. Fetterman has a 66% chance at flipping Pennsylvania, so it would be pretty big for Democrats to flip a state in a year like 2022, with Joe Biden being the most unpopular American president in the last couple of decades. And if you look at the odds for Fetterman, they have jumped up significantly over just the last couple of months. At the very beginning of this forecast, Mehmet Oz was seriously expected to win, and John Fetterman was very much out of this race after he had gotten his stroke. He still did win the Democratic primary, but his odds have only gone up recently as a result of the slew of new polls that have shown him leading, and currently we're expecting around a 3.3% margin for the Democratic nominee. So according to 538, Pennsylvania is going to be a lean Democratic state. Definitely the ratings have been just going up for Democrats, and this is going to be one of the major losses for the Republican Party. If they lose Pennsylvania, it's going to be much more difficult for them to win back the Senate majority, because if Democrats can pull off a win in Pennsylvania, it seems much more likely that they can win in Arizona and Georgia as well, and of course New Hampshire, and that would be enough for Democrats to hold on to the upper chamber. According to Decision Desk HQ, in the state of Pennsylvania, they actually have it as a toss-up, with John Fetterman having a 63% chance at winning, 36.9 for Mehmet Oz, so still a pretty close race and a very similar trend, but not quite a lean Democratic state according to this forecast. So on our DDHQ map, the state of Pennsylvania is going to be tilt for the Democratic Party. Next up, in the state of New Hampshire, we have the race between incumbent Maggie Hassan and whoever the Republicans choose to nominate. Looking at the Republican primary, I mean, we've seen one poll. This poll is going to be seriously inaccurate. Donald Boldeau is not the clear frontrunner right now. Chuck Norris is actually expected to win this race, and so we're just going to have to wait and see at this point. We did see one debate at the very end of June, but the Republican field is still pretty crowded, and a lot can change in just next month when they hold their primary on the 13th of September. So looking at the latest polls, Maggie Hassan has been doing pretty well, leading in basically every single poll that's been released for this race. So I do not expect Maggie Hassan to lose her re-election, and both forecasts don't expect that either. According to 538, New Hampshire is actually a likely state now, with Maggie Hassan just recently reaching a 75% chance at victory over Donald Boldeau, who the 530 believes is going to win the nomination, but they also don't update their predictions for the nominees, so they could still actually think that Chuck Norris is going to win, but they just kept Donald Boldeau in because they have been known to not update this. So right now, Maggie Hassan is heavily favored in this race, and if you look at the odds, they have only been going up here for the Democratic nominee, but not as significantly as we've seen for other races. The margin, we're expecting around a 5% margin, which would make sense with the likely rating for Democrats. So Maggie Hassan is currently expected to win by a likely margin according to 538, so we're going to fill that out on our map. And according to Decision Desk HQ, we are seeing a closer race, 70 for Maggie Hassan and 30 for Donald Boldeau. Looking at the latest polls, Democrats lead on average by 1.1% according to Decision Desk HQ. The polls in New Hampshire are not known for being that inaccurate. They are pretty accurate. They were accurate in 2020, and they were accurate in the Senate election there as well. And if you look at the fundraising, I mean, Maggie Hassan is absolutely destroying Donald Boldeau, and this is the problem with late primaries. If you're the challenging party, you have much less time to actually fundraise for your main candidate, and so the state of New Hampshire, according to Decision Desk HQ, is going to be lean for Democrats. And moving on to North Carolina, we're going to go over this race and then, of course, the two in Georgia and Florida. But Ted Budd versus Cheri Beasley in North Carolina. Democrats have not won a Senate or presidential election in the state since all the way back in 2008, with the election of Kay Hagan on the Senate level and, of course, Barack Obama on the presidential level. And so if you look at the polls for this race, we're actually seeing a pretty surprising trend. Budd's margin has now narrowed down to just 0.3% against Cheri Beasley. Both these nominees are pretty average for their parties. Actually, Ted Budd would be a pretty good nominee compared to candidates like Blake Masters, Herschel Walker, or J.D. Vance, but in a typical year, Ted Budd would be a pretty average nominee, and so that probably is going to be enough for him to win a race in North Carolina. Cal Cunningham did not even pull off a win against Tom Tillis in 2020. There's nothing that says that Cheri Beasley is going to become the next U.S. Senator from North Carolina. We're going to have to see a huge surprise for this race to go to the Democrats, and according to 538, North Carolina currently is a lean Republican state. Ted Budd has a 66% chance at winning. I mean, the odds have dropped off significantly for the Republicans over just the last 2 months. At the very beginning of the summer, they had an 81% chance of winning. The state of North Carolina was likely for Republicans for a very long time, and the margin was actually expected to be over 7%. Now it's gone all the way down to less than 3%, and Decision Desk HQ actually has it even worse for the Republican Party. According to this forecast, North Carolina is actually a toss-up state, with Ted Budd only having a 61% chance at winning, 38.5 to Cheri Beasley. So, very competitive race here in North Carolina. I think much more competitive than we previously thought, but in the end, Ted Budd is still probably going to win, no matter how well Cheri Beasley does in the polls. Democrats are known to underperform expectations in the state, and so that's why, even though we're seeing some pretty positive numbers for the Democrats, in the end, we're going to see Republicans hold on to the seat. So according to 538, the state of North Carolina is going to be lean for the Republicans, and of course, according to DDHQ, it's going to be tilt. Next up, in Georgia, we're seeing another disaster of a race for the Republican Party. I mean, just look at the 538 map here. Pennsylvania, Arizona, both lean Democratic states, according to DDHQ. Nevada and Arizona, both lean Democratic states. And of course, we all know that if Democrats win in Nevada, they're going to win in Pennsylvania. And Georgia is another one of those races that was so easily flippable for the Republican Party, but they chose to nominate Herschel Walker, somebody who literally cannot talk on the campaign trail, and somebody whose ex-wife is literally spreading ads on air in Georgia about how horrible of a husband and how abusive he was. So Raphael Warnock right now is in a very good position. He's getting pretty lucky with the Republican nominee that was basically chosen by Donald Trump at the very beginning of 2021. And so if you look at the polls here, Walker was expected to win this race for a very long time. As the Republican nominee in a state that has such a long Republican history, Herschel Walker was in a pretty good position in the state. However, just over the last 2 months, Raphael Warnock has taken a significant lead. Now he's up by 2.7%, and 2.7% in Georgia is significant. Polls are accurate in the Peach State, so 2.7% margin is much larger than the margin he had over in Kelly Loeffler in 2021 in that runoff election. So this is enough for Warnock to actually win, but I do think that he should be leading by just a bit larger of a margin just to be a bit safer, because of course 2022 is not going to be a year like 2020 or even 2021. And if you look at the 530 forecast, it is a very close race in Georgia, with both Walker and Warnock having a 50% chance of winning, but slightly higher the odds here for Warnock. It is still 50-50, but it's due to rounding. If you look at the margin here, yes, Raphael Warnock is expected to win by 0.6% in the first round, but he is not expected to win by the majority that he needs in Georgia, because all southern states require runoff races. And if you look at the chances here, I mean, another significant shift to the left, with Warnock only having a 38% chance at the beginning of June. So according to the 530 forecast, Georgia is very narrowly going to be a tilt Democratic state, the 51st state for Democrats according to this forecast. And according to Decision Desk HQ, Georgia is actually a lean Democratic state, with Raphael Warnock having a 69.5% chance at winning his re-election. I mean, at the very beginning of June, according to this forecast as well, Warnock was significantly favored to lose, but now he is very much heavily favored to defeat Walker. And if you look at the fundraising numbers in this race, I mean, a significant advantage for Warnock, even though Herschel Walker was the presumptive nominee basically since the very beginning of Biden's presidency. So according to DHQ, the state of Georgia is going to be lean for the Democratic Party, this being their 51st state on this map as well. And finally, in Florida, not very competitive of a race at all. 91% chance that it goes to Rubio, according to 538, in his matchup against Val Demings. Demings is going to win the Democratic nomination on the 23rd of August. And according to Decision Desk HQ, Florida is likely as well, with Rubio having an 89% chance of victory. So two very similar forecasts here. Val Demings is not in that great of a position. She is not that great of a nominee either. I believe she is too far left for the state of Florida. I think that a much more centrist candidate would have worked better. Someone like Nikki Fried or even Charlie Crist would have had a much better chance. And yes, Charlie Crist has not won any major statewide races in Florida as a Democrat, but I mean, no Democrats have been able to win in the last couple of years. And so on our maps here, both 538 and Decision Desk HQ have the Sunshine State as being likely, with Marco Rubio pretty easily winning his re-election to a third term. And so this is the 530 forecast for the Senate. 51-49 in favor of the Democrats. Nevada and Georgia are the two tilt races. According to Decision Desk HQ, we also have a 51-49 Senate, but the two tilt races are instead in Pennsylvania and North Carolina. And so, I mean, overall, Democrats are doing much better than they were before. Just over the last 2 months in the summer, Democrats' odds have increased significantly, with both forecasts giving Democrats around a 6 to 7 in 10 chance at winning control of the upper chamber for a second time in a row. So thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you're trying to comment down below whether or not you think Democrats will win control once again, and do you believe that 538 and Decision Desk HQ are both going to be accurate? Which one do you think is better? Subscribe to my channel if you have not. Consider getting a channel membership for just 99 cents per month if you're interested in that, and I will see you guys in the next video.